is Tuesday, February 24th, and welcome to the sixth annual Brandon's World Minute to Win It NFL QB version, the 2026 version. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, we are in collaboration with the one, the only Voltage Live. My social media links are in the description below. You guys know, as NFL free agency starts to hit and we have draft season right around the corner, what have I always said about the quarterback position? That it is the most important position in sports. So, way back when, at Black Squirrel Radio in 2021, when this show was on the airwaves in Kent, Ohio, I created a game based off the popular game show that was hosted back in the day by one Guy Ferri, known as Minute to Win It, where, of course, players had a minute to solve a complex challenge with household items. I have turned that into the Minute to Win It quarterback edition because, as you guys know, a lot of times I can ramble, I can talk a lot, but really, I think it's important that we simplify what the quarterback position looks like in sports for quarterback needy teams. So instead of me rambling on and on, I give myself a challenge every single year to pick teams that are either A, definitely in the quarterback market, or B, possibly in the quarterback market, whether it is for free agency or the draft. And I try to guess for those teams who their starting quarterback will be week one, or for that matter, who they're going to draft at the top of the NFL draft. Now, in the past, we've been very successful with these. Some of these I've been dead wrong about. I've moved it up the past few years and doing it right before free agency when some of the news comes out, for it to be a few weeks before free agency is sort of my prediction. If you'll notice, for this year, instead of doing 15 or 16 teams, like I usually do, we're pretty much down to, you know, eight or so teams plus four free agents. The free agency pool, in my opinion, is not great this year at the quarterback position. And there are teams that I feel like are less QB needy than maybe we think. And excuse me, I've talked about this before, where I do think there is a point in the NFL we could get to where all 32 teams have their starting quarterback. But we are not there yet. So without further ado, again, this is Brandon's World NFL QB Minute to Win It 2026. If you're listening on audio, you're going to hear the countdown clock. If you're listening on video, you're going to see above one of my shoulders a video, excuse me, from the official Minute to Win It countdown clock that's going to be on the screen. So let's go ahead. Let's put 60 seconds on the clock. And this first one is going to be obvious. But what will the Las Vegas Raiders do with the number one overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft? Here we go.
The game begins in 3, 2, 1.
So, as I said, this one is obvious. The Raiders are going to pick Fernando Mendoza. Now, I actually do feel like Fernando Mendoza, I know there's a lot of talk about where he ranks as a prospect. I think he is going to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL. And what's crazy, excuse me, what's crazy is he may be the worst quarterback next year in his division. You're talking about Patrick Mahomes, you're talking about Justin Herbert, you're talking about Bo Nix, Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, Andy Reid, obviously in this division. But I love what Quinn Kubiak did with Sam Darnold this event here in Seattle. I think that Fernando Mendoza is easily the best college prospect I've seen. I think possibly he's a better prospect than Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence. I've never seen anyone with his talent and his ability, maybe outside of Joe Burrow and Andrew Luck. So I do think Fernando Mendoza is a franchise quarterback, and he goes to the Raiders at number one. And you can see we finished that conversation with about 2 seconds left on the clock. It really does force you to simplify what these teams are going to do. Now, we know that this NFL draft class is not the best draft class, but these next two teams, in the Jets and the Cardinals, they are obviously both quarterback needy teams. For the Jets, Aaron Glenn, you could have made an argument. He could have been fired, in my opinion, but he was not. Justin Fields was a disaster last year. They had, I think, Brady Cook in at one point, Tyrod Taylor. What are the Jets going to do at number two?
The game begins in three, two, one.
So I think the Jets and the Browns are the two most obvious tanking teams in 2026. We're going to be looking ahead to an Arch Manning, a Dante Moore next year. If I'm the Jets, listen, I think this and the Browns are the most obvious tanking situation in the NFL. I'd bring back Justin Fields. That's what I think they're going to do. I think you might as well bring back Justin Fields. You could play, Brady Cook midway for the season. I mean, this is a team that only should not be trying to win. Very 2016, 2017 Browns-esque. Tear it down. They've already traded Sauce Gardner. They traded away Quentin Williams. There's not a lot to say about the Jets. Frank Reich is there as an offensive coordinator. I don't think they should take a shot on a quarterback early. Maybe if you draft the guy in the fourth or fifth round this year, take a shot at him. I don't know. I think the Jets are sort of in purgatory. I would just bring back Fields for one more year and see how it goes. If you get your franchise in 2027. And bang, we are right there on the mark. So, now Arizona. They're reportedly going to move off Kyler Murray. Jacoby Brissett is still potentially in the mix. They do have a new head coach in Mike LaFleur, who, of course, worked with the Rams as their offensive coordinator. Of course, is the brother of Green Bay Packers head coach Matt LaFleur. Arizona's in a tough division. They got the Niners, they got the Rams, they got the defending champion Seahawks. What do they do with the number 3 overall pick and the quarterback position in general?
The game begins in three, two, one.
So Arizona, again, very similar. I feel this way about the Jets. I mean, their offense was good. They did lose Drew Penting. We'll see if Mike LaFleur can be as good of an OC/head coach as Drew Penting was as OC. But I think with the relationship that Mike LaFleur obviously has with his brother Matt, to me, you keep Jacoby Brissett, but you also bring in Malik Willis from the Packers. You pay him, you give yourself a shot, because you're in a division with Brock Purdy. You're in a division with Sam Darnold now, who's hot in Seattle. With Matthew Stafford and the Rams, who may only have one more year. I don't know if Arizona necessarily has time to wait, sit back, develop a quarterback. I think there are more quarterback-needy teams, like the Jets, the Browns, and a couple other teams that we'll get to. So I think Arizona needs to go and get Malik Willis, and if he doesn't work out, then you can play Jacoby Brissett. But I think you're going to see if Malik Willis becomes your franchise quarterback this year. So again, with about 2 seconds left on the clock. Now, what do the Cleveland Browns do? They have 2 first-round picks. They have one at 6 overall, and they have one at, I believe it's 23 or 24 from the Jacksonville Jaguars because of the Travis Hunter deal. Shedeur Sanders on the roster. Dylan Gabriel is still on the roster. Deshaun Watson is somehow still on the roster. Todd Monken is there now as head coach. What are they going to do at quarterback?
The game begins in three, two, one.
So I think even more than the Jets, the Browns are tanking. Now, I would start Shedeur. I play him all 17 games. I figure out what you have in him. It sounds like they may go to Deshaun Watson, which if they do, Browns fans should be rioting in the streets because Deshaun Watson should not be playing in the brown and the orange or really the NFL ever again. But Dylan Gabriel, I said it all during the season, to me, he's a career backup. He's not an NFL quarterback. I like what I've seen out of Shedeur, and I'd like to see him get more weapons. I don't trust Andrew Berry to do that. But the Browns have 2 first-round picks and an offensive line that's tons of free agents. They have no receivers. They have one good tight end in Harold Fannin right now that Shedeur Sanders can throw to. They need to build up this roster. I would have traded Myles Garrett a year ago and got a haul of picks and built around Mason Graham and that defensive line. They didn't do that, but the quarterback is not the issue in Cleveland. The roster is. Let Shedeur Sanders play all 17 games, and for the love of God, do not let Deshaun Watson play next year. And boom, we are right there at 60 seconds on the clock. Now, the next team is going to be, they have a new head coach in Jeff Hafley, former Boston College head coach, former Green Bay Packer defensive coordinator. In the AFC East, we already talked about, I think the Jets are tanking. The Dolphins are in a very interesting situation with Tua Tagovailoa's contract. Do they move off him? What do they do at the most important position in sports?
The game begins in three, two, one.
Listen, I don't think the Dolphins are this team that'll just tank. I mean, yes, they got rid of Tyreek Hill. Yes, they got rid of Bradley Chubb. They're going to tear down the roster a little bit. But I think Tua is, he's an average quarterback. He's probably 14, 15 quarterback in the NFL. You can win games with Tua. I'm very interested to see what coming from the Boston College, being a defensive-minded background again, if the Dolphins can get the right offensive coordinator, what they do with Tua. I imagine over that Packer tree, it's going to be a very similar scheme to what he ran with Mike McDaniel in Miami. So, I mean, you got Jalen Waddle there. Darren Waller had a pretty good year. I think you got to boost the offensive line. This is a team that I think is clearly third in the AFC East. They're not going anywhere, but you're kind of trapped. I think Tua was one injury away from his career ending. But if Tua doesn't work out, at least towards the end of the year, you can see what you have in Quinn Ewers. And boom, that 60 seconds for Miami definitely flew by. But now, let's get into what the Indianapolis Colts, who started off really well last year. Obviously, Daniel Jones, they were in position to potentially get the number one seed in the AFC. Before DJ went down, they still have Riley Leonard, the quarterback out of Notre Dame that led them to the national championship a couple years ago on their roster. We saw them bring in Philip Rivers at the end of the year as sort of a band-aid. This team has been sort of flipping Carson Wentz, Philip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett, just a rotational bit of quarterback since the retirement of Andrew Luck in 2019. Where do they find their next franchise signal caller?
The game begins in three, two, one.
So I do not think the answer is Anthony Richardson. I think he's burned too many bridges. I think Shane Steichen's done with him. I think they should move on. I don't think Riley Leonard is the guy yet, though I thought he played pretty well in Week 18, though that was against mostly the Texans' backups, especially in the second half. There are rumors out there that Derek Carr could be coming back, and, there's all this potential about maybe Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. I actually like Derek Carr here in Indianapolis a lot. We saw what Shane Steichen can get out of veteran quarterbacks. Philip Rivers, Daniel Jones. You have the run game with Jonathan Taylor, the good offensive line led by Quentin Nelson. And the thing I like about Indianapolis compared to Minnesota is the division. Because he would have to go on the road to Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Houston, as opposed to Chicago and Green Bay, potentially late in the season. More cold weather, I would argue, out there in the NFC than the AFC when the going gets tough. So I think Derek Carr should be the starting quarterback for the Colts next year if he does return, if not Riley Leonard. And you can see right there, 60 seconds flies by in this. That's why it's such a challenge. But now, we got to get to the Atlanta Falcons. So the new head coach in Kevin Stefanski. Kirk Cousins is still technically on the roster. Will he become the new year? Will he replace Michael Penix, their franchise quarterback?
The game begins in three, two, one.
So no, I don't. I think Michael Penix is going to be the franchise quarterback for Atlanta. I think they're going to give him all 17 starts next year. I'm very interested to see Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator there in Atlanta, is going to be calling plays, not Kevin Stefanski. You have, a similar system from what Zach Roberts ran the last couple of years there in Atlanta. So it's not a new system for Michael Penix. I think if Michael Penix is healthy, he throws a beautiful ball. We don't know yet if he's going to be ready for week one. He was the quarterback out of that 2024 draft class most people are concerned with, even more than J.J. McCarthy, because of the injuries. And, I like Penix. Again, I'm not a biggest fan of lefties. You know that. I think he's a bigger Tua, but with a stronger arm. I think you got to give him a shot. You got Kyle Pitts, you got Drake London, you have Bijan Robinson, maybe the best running back in football, a good solid offensive line. Let Penix play all 17 games, and let Kirk Cousins test free agency. Okay, that was the Atlanta Falcons. So now we talked about Michael Penix, who's in that 2024 draft class. There's another question about another quarterback there. Reports out there say the Minnesota Vikings are going to bring in QB competition for one J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. But who will that QB competition be?
game begins in 3, 2, 1.
So to be clear, I do think that JJ is going to start the year week 1, but in free agency, I would bring in Anthony Richardson. This is where I would go if I was Anthony Richardson. Listen, I always liked Anthony Richardson's traits. Tall, strong, he can throw 70-yard bombs. He misses the easy stuff, and obviously durability, sort of similar to JJ McCarthy, where sometimes JJ throws a beautiful ball, other times he looks absolutely lost. Now, for the record, I am not giving up personally on JJ McCarthy. I still think with the right coaching and the right tools, he can be the franchise quarterback in Minnesota. But this is put up or shut up year for him. I hope he stays healthy, but I wouldn't bring in a veteran to put pressure on McCarthy. I'd bring in a young kid who you can develop behind him. You know, if JJ doesn't work out, you give him a shot. I think Anthony Richardson could be the next Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield resurrection project in the league. Anthony Richardson, go to Minnesota to back up JJ. And now we get to the last team on this list, and then we're going to have 3 quarterbacks. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, after 19 years, no longer have the standard in the building. It is now Mike McCarthy, who obviously in his past does have a relationship with Aaron Rodgers, but is bringing back A-Rod the smart move for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The game begins in 3, 2, 1.
And I would argue it's not. You know, I would have Will Howard, who I don't think is going to be a very good NFL quarterback. I know a lot of Ohio State fans disagree with me, but I'd start Will Howard 17 games. I know the Steelers were the Steelers, and we don't have losing seasons. You got to have one losing season, like the Patriots did. They had 2 losing seasons, they're back in the Super Bowl. It's okay. You got to figure out your next franchise quarterback here. You cannot be spinning the wheels at Aaron Rodgers or Justin Fields or Russell Wilson when you got to deal with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and potentially an Arch Manning next year in Cleveland in your division. So the Steelers got to either find out if Will Howard's their guy or they got to just tank and go for it and get a quarterback in next year's draft. Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers was fun. Aaron didn't cause no drama. I thought Aaron played well last year. But let's face it, his last pass in the NFL, in my opinion, was a pick 6. I don't think the Steelers should bring him back. I think it should be Will Howard in 2026. So now, speaking of Aaron Rodgers, if I don't have him in Pittsburgh, if I don't have him in Minnesota, where does he play next year?
The game begins in 3, 2, 1.
So I think Aaron Rodgers actually starts week 1 of 2026 in September on the couch. I think he will announce his retirement. I don't think the Steelers are going to want him back. I think Mike McCarthy wants to start fresh. I don't think I'd bring him in if I was the Vikings. I think I'd go more young. I think that would bust J.J. McCarthy's confidence more than Aaron being there. You know, if a quarterback gets hurt or somebody needs a quarterback or a young guy's really struggling, like McCarthy maybe later in the year and you want to bring in Aaron, sure. But I think it's very possible Aaron Rodgers, his last pass he's ever thrown was a pick 6 in that wild card game. Aaron, arguably one of the most, if not the most talented quarterback of all time. However, in the postseason, he was not always successful. He got to only 1 Super Bowl. He did win that Super Bowl, and he won Super Bowl MVP. It's sad to see Aaron Rodgers go, but I think that this was his last year of his NFL career. So we pretty much nailed that one. I mean, about 5-6 seconds left on the clock there. We got some other free agency quarterbacks. I already mentioned this offseason that I think Arizona is going to move off Kyler Murray. I think they're going to go the Malik Willis route. If not, you can have Jacoby Brissett play the year, and play for a quarterback in 2027. The question for Kyler Murray is, I don't think he's going to get a starting job. I already mentioned I think Anthony Richardson's a resurrection project. I think Kyler Murray could be a resurrection project, but where is he going to be in 2026?
The game begins in 3, 2, 1.
This may be a little bit of an interesting / hot take, but I think Kyler Murray should become the backup quarterback in Baltimore. Backup Lamar Jackson. Very similar skill set. Plus, Lamar Jackson always gets hurt. It seems like Kyler Murray would be bound to play a couple games, I feel like, this year. Plus, you're going to a well-run organization, the Ravens, when you were with a poor-run organization for years in the Arizona Cardinals. I think Kyler could learn from Lamar how to be a better quarterback in the pocket, how to run more efficiently, how to slide. Learn from that Baltimore Ravens infrastructure, and then try next year like a Sam Darnold, where he went from Minnesota, from San Francisco, when he backed up Brock Purdy to get his career back on track. Kyler Murray has always been one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. I mean, he was a talented baseball player. He could have played baseball if he wanted to. His athleticism was off the charts. He's got to get better from the pocket, and to do that, go watch Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. And the last quarterback I have on our West Side NFL QB minute to win in 2026 is Kirk Cousins, who, again, last year, not expected to play a lot in Atlanta. Penix goes down. He actually plays well at the end of last year. Atlanta wins in the last four to get to not I believe it was 8-9. They still end up missing out on the playoffs. So where's Kirk Cousins going to be? He's very likable. He's good in the pocket. He's an efficient quarterback. Where's he going to play next year?
The game begins in 3, 2, 1.
I actually think, they're talking about a Minnesota reunion. I don't think they would do that with him and JJ. I think the Rams are happy with Jimmy Garoppolo being the backup. Listen, if Malik Willis is going to go to Arizona or go be a starter somewhere, there's speculation maybe Pittsburgh would be interested in him. I think Kirk should go to Green Bay. If Jordan Love has an injury history, I think Kirk being in that system with Matt LaFleur, it's a very, familiar system with him. You have good weapons there, and Tucker Crouch will be back, and Matthew Golden, and, Wicks and some of those guys. Obviously, Josh Jacobs providing, good stability in the run game. Packers always have a good offensive line. I get it. Cold weather, December, January, Kirk's not used to it, but he did play with it in Washington, and to me, it would be a good fit there to back up Jordan Love, be a good guy in the room, and, be in that Matt LaFleur scheme and help out the rest of the offense there. So, ladies and gentlemen, to summarize what I said tonight, NFL QB minute to win in 2026. I have the Raiders at number one taking Fernando Mendoza. I have the Jets at number two taking the best player available, whether it's a defensive end, offensive lineman. They stick with Justin Fields. I think Arizona is going to go out. I think they're going to keep percent of their backup, but I think they're going to sign Malik Willis. They're going to see how it goes. I think they take the best available player or trade down at number three. I think at number six, the Browns do not take a quarterback. They'll stick with Shedeur Sanders. They better not start Deshaun Watson. I am the Dolphins stick with Tua Tagovailoa for one more year. If I'm Indy, Riley Leonard is my backup next year, but I go out and I see if Derek Carr, if that's the place Derek Carr wants to return to the week with. I think Atlanta stays with Penix. I think they'll let Kirk Cousins go, however. I think Minnesota, their competition they bring in for JJ, who I do think does start week one, but I would bring in Anthony Richardson. If I'm Pittsburgh, I move off Aaron Rodgers. I go with Will Howard for the year. If I'm Aaron, I stay ready to play. Maybe I come back late in the year for a contending team, but initially I'm retiring. I'm not going back to Pittsburgh. And I think Kyler Murray should back up Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, and I think Kirk Cousins should back up Jordan Love in Green Bay. But again, I have Aaron Rodgers retiring. I have, Kyler Murray being a backup, and I have Kirk Cousins being a backup. And I think the Browns, it's pretty well known. They want to see what you got in Shedeur Sanders. For Miami, they want to see what they have in Tua. I think Indianapolis believes they know what they have in Daniel Jones. He's just hurt. Minnesota wants to see what they have in JJ. Arizona wants to see what they have in Penix. If we want to see what we want to see happens, Shedeur pops. JJ McCarthy is good. Michael Penix is good. Malik Willis works out. He's the franchise guy in Arizona. I think the Jets and maybe the Browns and possibly Pittsburgh, if Will Howard doesn't work out, you can make a case those are the three quarter QB needy teams back at the top in 2027. I think the Raiders will find their franchise quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. But thank you so much for listening to NFL QB Minute to win in 2026. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.